Welcome to Mind Shift Power Podcast, a show for teenagers and the adults who work with them, where we have raw and honest conversations. I'm your host, Fatima Bey, the Mind Shifter. And welcome, everyone. Today we have with us Xavier Meza, and he is from Chicago, Illinois. He's 18. And you saw the cover of this episode, so you know what it's about. And just as an FYI, this is being recorded in September 2024. Things are moving so fast, who knows what it'll be like when you listen and listen in the future. So today's a little bit different because today you are not here to give your opinion. We're not looking for your opinion. You're actually here to listen to one. So I think it's very important that we listen to all voices, not just the ones that we agree with. And Xavier does represent a portion of our society and our future. So whether we like what he has to say or not, whether we agree or not, or totally agree, we need to hear what our youth are thinking because they're our future. So how are you doing today, Xavier?
Doing great. How are you?
I'm good. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Absolutely.
So, as in a normal Fatima fashion, I like to dive right in. So why the hell are you voting for Trump?
Okay, so the first thing I want to say is I'm not an expert at all politically. I hear things, I see things, and I understand things.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what overall led to my conclusion. So I guess I would say the first thing is that I'm an America first kind of guy. So when I think of who I want to vote for or kind of policies or anything like that, the first thing I'm thinking is what's the best thing for America? I'm not usually thinking about myself as much because while I do think, I probably should think for myself, but the most of the time I'm thinking for America. So when I think policies wise, I just think right now, really the main things that I'm more worried about is foreign affairs. So like World War III potentially, the economy and the border. So right now it's just with World War III is really fast coming, especially with Putin, Russia, Ukraine. I don't know much about Israel, Palestine, but I know that those tensions have been very high, especially recently. The economy, I remember in 2016, 2020 when gas prices were really low, and then all of a sudden they're like double, 3 times that much. And then just the border, look, I don't have a problem with immigrants and people wanting to come to America for a better future. I don't have a problem with that. It's just you have to come legally and you have to come under the law because we can't have people that just come undocumented or unvetted and they're coming into the country. That's what makes us a country is because we have these laws that we all decide to agree on as a constitution. So those are just kind of the main three things where I'm just like, okay, I think I agree with Trump's policies more than Kamala's, and that's kind of just my perspective on it.
So what I'm hearing is that it's your perception of the policies that that draw you into voting for Trump.
Yeah, it's just the realistic kind of standpoint. I just there's also a couple other things.
Like what?
I definitely don't agree. I definitely don't agree with him on everything. For example, I know he wants to legalize weed and marijuana in a lot of places. I don't agree with that, but if we have to look one-on-one and like who do I agree with more and more, it's going to be Trump in my opinion.
Okay. If there were a different person in that position who was our nominee, who was just on the Republican side, would you still feel the same way?
That depends on the person. It really does matter. It really does matter who it is. When I think of Trump, I've watched a couple of his rallies. I've also watched a couple of Kamala's rallies. I just see him as a genuine person. He goes up. I remember seeing there was a rally where somebody fainted and I think it was just because of the heat or something. And he just went and gave him a hug and asked if they were all okay. I think everyone likes to point to the assassination attempt and when he got up and said fight. That's powerful, and that's something that it takes a really strong person to do that. And I think that's someone that really needs to represent this country, especially now.
Okay. Let's go back to something you said earlier. You said you're an America first person.
Yeah.
Why?
Oh, it's the country I live in. I think, and it's actually a problem I have. I hear a lot of people when I talk to, they don't really care about like the country that much. You know, I remember
Hmm.
seeing, I know RFK Jr. said something about how like there's a very small percentage of Americans that are proud to be an American now compared to like 50
Right.
years ago,
Hmm.
where it was much higher. And the fact
Right.
that you live in your own country and you're not even proud to be in there, you're not even proud to of what it stands for or anything like that, and you live there, and you just have no care for it or anything like that. I find that really just dismembering. I just don't. It's hard to watch and it's hard to listen to when other people say stuff like that. So it's
Why do
like,
you think it is?
why do I think it's hard
Why do you think a lot of people feel that way?
that they don't? Um, I not. Hmm. Would say maybe it's a lack of just, I guess, overall maybe understanding of like what it really means to be an American. You know, I've also think, you know, people mention the American dream and like what it like the white picket fence, the house and stuff like that. I think we've kind of lost that over the years as well.
Hmm.
Um,
There's a lot of people that agree with you on that.
yeah. And I think when you lose that, and then we kind of lose the identity of America too, like being an American, you know. I guess I wouldn't call it a stereotype, but just the things that, you know, you're used to seeing what it means to be an American, those things have kind of diminished over time. And I think that's kind of probably the greatest reason why people don't, I guess, feel proud. And they also just, everybody lives a different lifestyle. You know, we're all culturally diverse, which isn't a bad thing. I'm just saying when it comes to living in a country, um, you know, I would say you should be proud of it and you should be willing to be a part of it and contribute to it.
So you think that people in Kenya should be proud of being Kenyan? I'm just picking a random country.
Yeah. If you're willing to live, if you're willing to live in a country, I mean, especially now that we live in where you can move anywhere you want to, if you truly believe in a country, that's the country you should live in, and you should want to live there. I don't have an issue with that. I don't. If I mean, if somebody's Kenyan and they want to live in Kenya, they should be proud to be there. If you're not proud to be there, then why do you want to be there then so much? Yeah, it could be like an economic thing or like maybe you have money issues or something. But
Hmm.
I mean, I would argue if you want to live somewhere, you should live there, and that's what I'd say.
Okay. Do you feel that many of your peers agree with you on patriotism?
Oof, no, not really. Honestly, I actually I talk a lot about patriotism. Sometimes maybe I'm like making a joke, not about it specifically, but you know, some whenever I talk about it with friends or something, usually the biggest thing they say is like they're not like they don't really care about politics, which I always find a little weird because politics, in my opinion, affects everyone.
It does. Hmm.
I feel like no matter what you do, politics does affect you, which is why I feel like people should care for it. But yeah, when it comes to patriotism, especially in my generation, I really don't think a lot of people really feel.
I want to
Um,
ask you a little bit about how you grew up because I think how you grew up may form some of your opinions as well. I think that's true for all of us, regardless of
yeah.
what side of the fence we're on.
Hmm.
Um, did you grow up in a household where politics was talked about?
No,
Oh,
honestly,
okay.
yeah, we didn't really care about politics. It kind of came when I went to in my junior year of high school. I started I guess I started like watching more podcasts. I started exercising more. I started like everything kind of started changing around my junior year.
Hmm.
I guess I would start to say I started to be awakened to like what the world is around me and so like, hey, you're becoming an adult.
Yeah, that's good.
So I think that's kind of when I was really started to get interested. I was like, okay, so this is what's going on in the world. I also started taking a politics class, and you know, I was learning a little bit of stuff like that. But no, we never really talked about politics. In fact, I used to be. I would argue I used to be Democratic, or I used to be on that side because I mean that was my whole family, and that was everything I ever heard.
Okay.
Um, I, this might sound weird, but it almost felt like whenever You mentioned Republicans or even Trump around like 2016 or 2015. It was more like that was like kind of like the evil side,
Mm-hmm.
and that was kind of like the bad guy, and that's how it felt. And at the time I agreed with that, until I started, doing my own research, looking into things on my own, and then eventually over time I just changed my mind, and I was like, okay, you know what, maybe I do align with these views a little bit more. So,
What
but
research did you do?
it was just so most of the time when I was getting information, it was from people, so people around me,
Okay.
you know. When I was doing like own research, it would either be for my politics class, it was be a lot of looking for like news articles and stuff like that. Obviously, there's media bias, so there's always it's almost the same thing as when people are talking to me, and um, at the time with more like democratic values and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So when I guess my own research was kind of just like really, it all started when I was deciding, okay, maybe I should look at the other side too,
Mm-hmm.
because right now I was living in a mindset. Back then, I was living in a mindset where I was like, okay, this is who I align with. But then it was like, okay, well, if you don't even know what the other side aligns with, how can you align with your own side, but without knowing about the other side? Is the kind of thing I'd want to really preface, if that makes sense. So
That does
like,
make sense, actually.
yeah, just understanding both sides was kind of my thing, and then making a decision from there instead of only knowing one.
Right. I would agree with you on that point. Regardless of where anybody stands, it's pretty ignorant to just go with the flow of what you've only heard from one side.
Hmm.
So with when it comes to immigration, I have another question for you. How many immigrants have you actually known?
Um, a couple. I'm not gonna name names, but
No, you
I
don't
mean
need to.
they're good people, and like seriously, like I don't think there's a single immigrant I met where I thought like, oh, I wouldn't say something stupid like, oh, I don't want this person to be here. Like I think that's
Mm-hmm.
closed minded, but
Mm-hmm.
there's a couple, and I know, and they're just like, the average people I talk to. They're great people. They have their own experiences. Obviously, I don't have a problem with them at all. Um, there's one in specific I could think of. I remember he got his I guess I'm not an expert, but I guess he got his green card or something, and I
Mm-hmm.
remember he showed me how excited he was,
Well,
and
that is a big deal when they get that. Yeah.
yeah, and he was, and that was good for me to see. I was like, wow, he really, he almost seemed more like American loving than most of the people that who were born here
I can tell you,
felt.
having worked with a lot of foreigners, I worked with a local refugee group for a while. In fact, I used to hire from there. They're just working with a lot of foreigners. Getting a green card is a big deal, and you are 1000% right. Many of the foreigners who come here and are able to get a green card and eventually able to become a citizen, they know more American history than the average American, and they're prouder to be an American than most of us. I will say that you're 1000% right on that.
Yeah,
Because they had to go through more to get it. We're just spoiled brats who were born into it, so,
yeah,
um, so yeah, you're definitely right about that. Now I want to ask you about your perspective a little bit more.
okay,
So, where do you see this country in 10 years? So, I want to also mention to the audience. I meant to say this in the beginning. Xavier is 18. He just graduated from high school a few months ago. But he's 18, so he can vote. And his vote matters because every single vote matters, actually. Um, but what do you see? Where do you see this country in 10 years?
well, I mean, that depends on who wins.
Hmm.
Are you also asking who I think would win, and then
No,
from there, are you more just
just in
saying
general, where you see our culture going, where you see the country headed.
culture
You
going?
can tell me the answers for both candidates if you want.
Okay. I'll start with under. If I think if Kamala Harris becomes president, I think most of her policies are pretty much the same as what we've already seen the past 4 years.
Hmm.
She doesn't really plan on changing that much, if any. So I don't. I think there's just going to be a lot of. I mean, let's start with like the BLM riots. Um, there's been a lot of protests where there's been a lot of like looting and criminal activity and stuff like that. I know crime has also been raised. I think it was like 20 to 30%, somewhere around there. So I really don't think it's going to go in a good direction. I do think we'll end up in World War III because I don't think Kamala's willing to talk and do the hard talking to big leaders in the world. I mean, she won't even go to an interview for somebody that doesn't agree with her standpoints. So I think that's important too, because if you're the president of the best country in the world, in my opinion, um, you have to be able to do the hard talks and be able to defend the nation. And I don't think she's capable of doing that. So I would argue we would end up in World War III. Um, what else? I do. If we keep having the border that's just wide open, especially now, I think
Mm-hmm.
it's just there's so many criminals that are coming in. There's people from jails coming in from multiple countries, not just like South America, but even across the continents. And if that keeps happening, crime's just going to go through the roof. It's almost going to seem like an anarchy.
What about the
Um,
economy?
yeah, I mean, it would just. I don't think she's capable of fixing it. I know now they're trying to do. They're trying to lower gas prices. I'm not going to speak on like if it's like a political move or something, but I guess with the economy, I don't see it going down either. I mean, I don't. She hasn't said anything about the. She hasn't said anything about. All she said is like doing tax cuts for the rich, and personally, I don't think that's ever going to work. And I just don't. I don't think she has anything new that's going to work.
Okay.
That it's really going to affect the prices, especially now, which are just so high. And yeah, I don't see anything good for the future of the Kamala Harris administration. But I know with Trump, I know immediately he said his first day ones were to he said in his words drill baby drill, which is just more fracking, and then to seal the border, which is definitely really important. I know he plans on working more for energy for the economy because energy revolves around everything. And he mentions like using oil a lot, and that how the U.S. has more oil than any country in the world, which is definitely really important. And I know personally. I mean, Trump was the only president I think since like 2000 that didn't start any wars or get the U.S. into any new wars.
Mm.
Um, I know he talks a lot about how he was able to connect with the world leaders, which some people think is a bad thing, but I would argue it's a good thing. Um, that he's able to connect with world leaders and like and like be friendly, but at the same time say like, hey, we're stronger than you, and if anything happens, we're willing to do something about it. And I think that's why what made him such a good president, because he was willing to be the strong leader that we needed, and he didn't cause any wars because of it. And I think under the administration we have now, um, they weren't willing to do any of the big talks and anything like that, and they just let Russia invade Ukraine, and all these wars that are going on that people in America are protesting about all the time. So it's just, yeah, I would argue under Trump it would be more of an uphill with America, where as our current administration, I don't think it would go well for America.
And what about the economy if Trump wins?
With Trump, well, again, like using energy, um, this energy
Mm.
revolves around anything. When there's good energy and lowering the energy prices. So, for example, the electricity or anything, or even with bills and gas and the houses, the fact that he's willing to lower those by using American like producing oil in America, it definitely helps the economy. And then just like thinking about how the economy was from 2016 to 2020 and then 2020 to 2024. I mean, I remember gas being like $2 to $2.50, and now I'm going outside and it's like $3.30 and $3.70. and then there's like inflation's the whole thing again, and that's just from reckless spending. I mean, we could talk about how much money that the Biden administration spent on for Ukraine, when I think we can all agree that that money should have went to us, and there's definitely a lot of problems that we definitely need fixing. So things like that too. I do think the economy would be better under Trump, though.
Okay. What do you see? Again, we're talking about the future.
Yep.
How do you feel like the people that are in your generation right now, who are in your age range, which I will say is 17 to 25, just make it that narrow. How do you see them running politics in 10 years? Or even 20 years, because maybe I should say a longer time span, but just in the future.
It's a really good question. I mean, it all has to be about kind of how they obtain information and then use that to their own perspective during that time. I think it's just, I guess it's a difficult question because, I mean, there's definitely, everyone has their own perspective, but I do think, in my generation, I'm pretty sure there's some chart or something somewhere where people are generally in my generation becoming more Republican. I think
so?
especially, yeah, that's what I've heard. At least a little bit, like not like nothing drastic, but a little bit, I think. And I'm the question where I'm facing is like, would that stay for a while? Because I mean, again, if Trump wins, it depends on what he does in his 4 years. If Kamala wins, it depends on what she does in her 4 years and what people tend to agree with. I guess regarding the future, I think it's just, it kind of just depends what happens around us and like what people really think is going to happen. I mean, if we're in World War III and stuff like that, people tend to become more like traditional, more conservative when things are like really hard around us. But when everything's easy and there's nothing going on, usually I would argue people are more democratic, more liberal. It's that kind of thing. But also just how they learn, what they come up with. I think politics is also just itself is becoming more, I wouldn't say more of a joke, but I mean, like, if you look at the debates, I remember when when Obama and I think his name was Mitt Romney, and the debates, they used to shake hands before, and they would obviously they would talk bad on each other because, well, they're debating, but I mean, there was still like respect there.
Yeah.
That would also be like my biggest critique or one of my critiques of Trump, is how there's a lack of respect for the people around him. And even though I know he's talking bad on Biden and Kamala for his campaign, but I mean, they're also still the president. Biden's still the president of the United States. I mean, there's still, if it was me, I would still try and show at least a little respect. But yeah, but I don't know. It's a shaky future. It's just, it all depends on what happens, I guess, in the next couple of years and how the world around us is.
Okay. What advice do you have or what comments do you have for youth, people around your age group right now?
Comments. I would say the first biggest thing is to make sure that the information that you receive is two-sided. So make sure you're receiving both perspectives, because I mean, while I may consider one side, I'm not going to tell somebody not to vote for the other side or anything like that. I'm just going to say what I think, and then if they want to listen to me, they can. I would just make sure you're looking at both sides instead of only looking at one. I think that's just the most crucial, because that's where, at that point, you're using your own brain instead of using other people's to make your own decision. And which I also think is a little bit of loss, because I think a lot of people are thinking for other people instead of for themselves. So that'd be my first comment.
I was going to ask you what your advice is for adults, but I think the same thing applies. Many of them are just following
but
whatever.
Yeah, I mean, adults would just be like, listen to our generation more, what we're saying. I definitely think there's some things that us kids are going through right now that, especially at like the age of 18, and like trying to afford college or something like that is really important. Really important, or basically trying to make enough money to make it somewhere now is definitely something important. So maybe like advice like that.
It's different for you than it was for us, for sure.
Yeah. Stuff like that.
One more question.
Okay.
Since it has already happened twice, what would it look like if Trump were really assassinated?
In my opinion, I think there's a lot of Trump supporters that are very, very into Trump and very, I guess I wouldn't say hard-headed, but they're definitely like big supporters. I do think there would be there would definitely be riots everywhere. If it's already happened 2 times and it happens again, I think there's so much already like going on with how much, people have been they've already been like they've seen it happen almost twice, and there's so much build to that. So I think if it happened, it would truly be some kind of form of anarchy or something like that, because then we would almost be forced to have Kamala Harris. I don't think anybody else would be able to run and beat her at that point.
Yeah.
And at that point, you're taking away a choice from a lot of Americans who do feel very strongly about their political views. So I do think like a lot of bad things would happen. I think people would be running on the streets. I think.
Do you think that many of those people would be your age?
Probably not.
Okay.
Probably not. I think there would be older people, people a little bit older. But maybe, I mean, because again, I think my generation doesn't really think about politics that much. At least that's not their biggest focus right now. I think it's when you graduate college or when you're really joined the workforce, is kind of like, okay, well, now I'm starting to realize what's going on around me. You know, maybe you're going to the grocery store and the prices are too high, or trying to get gas and prices are too high and stuff like that. I think that at that point is when you start to realize politics more. But I think now, people my age don't really think that much. So they would probably, they'd probably be scared, my generation, because they probably wouldn't know exactly what's going on. Because not a lot of information like that gets to us. But yeah, I think there'd be a lot of tyranny, for sure, if Trump did get assassinated.
Unfortunately, I think you're right.
Yeah.
Not for good reasons, but I think you're right. Well, Xavier, thank you for coming on and letting us know what you think. And I'm hoping that audience that you were able to hear an 18-year-old in America right now. And while Xavier does not represent every 18-year-old, of course, he does represent a portion of our society that, whether we like it or not, they exist, and we should listen because they're a part of us too. So again, thank you, Xavier.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
And now for a mind-shifting moment. I want to bring you back to something that Xavier said in the episode today. It's important that you get your information, whether you're voting for Harris or Trump or putting in Mickey Mouse on the ballot. Wherever you are, it is very important that we get our information from multiple sources and not just people who think like us. When you do this, you become very biased and very ignorant, quite frankly, and very easily manipulated. It is best to get your information from multiple sources and then come to your own conclusion, whatever that may be for you. So just consider, what are your news sources? What are your resources of information that you take on and believe? I really want you to question that, regardless of what your political views are. Thank you for listening to Mindshift Power Podcast. Please like and subscribe to my YouTube channel at The Mindshifter. If you have any comments, topic suggestions, or would like to be a guest on the show, please visit fatimabay.com/podcast. Remember, there's power in shifting your thinking. Tune in for next week.